If you have an idea for an app that you feel really good about, but you've never built or launched an app before, then your steps ahead can feel pretty confusing because the reality is there isn't just one path to take to build and launch an app. There are tons of them. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to turn your idea into an app as a first-time founder, even if you don't know how to code. And at the end, you can actually use this as a checklist for yourself. The first step is to validate your app idea. And if you feel like you've already done this, it's worth it to still analyze your idea based on what we're about to go through. Let's switch over to the iPad here. So you want to consider 5 aspects of your app idea. And the first one is your target market. Do you have experience related to the target market of your app? That's really what I'm looking for here. Now, this might be because you work within the industry, maybe you hold a certain job title or role, or maybe you share demographics as a consumer or values and interests. The reason why I want to see this is because if you have that experience, that insight and knowledge to the target market, then that kind of gives you a default level of validation. This is certainly not the only level of validation you need, but if that's not in place, then it can be difficult to find success with your app. Next up, you want to look for existing alternatives. Now, these can be other apps that your target market is using to solve the problem your app will solve, or it could be other things like spreadsheets or manual processes, maybe even employees. But the point is that your target market is already trying to solve the problem that your app will solve, and ideally they are paying to solve that problem in some way. It's important, however, that your app is going to fill a hole within those existing alternatives. So is it different in some way? Does it meet a need that is currently going unmet? Is it better in some way? Does it serve a particular segment that is currently underserved? Whatever it is, it needs to fill some sort of hole within the existing alternatives. All right, from there, we want to look at the urgency. And essentially, we just want to make sure that your target market feels some level of urgency to seek out a solution to the problem your app solves and to pay for it. So is it causing them to waste money or to waste time, or is it causing some high level of inconvenience? If those things are all true, then you have a much higher level of validation for your idea. From there, we want to look at industry ties. And this one is sort of similar to the first factor that we looked at, which is experience relative to your target market. But it's a little bit different because with the experience relative to your target market, you really just want to make sure that you personally understand the problem and the processes that are going to be involved with solving it. But with industry ties, we're looking to make sure you actually know other people who have this problem as well. Because if you do, that's going to be further validation for you, but it's also going to make it a lot easier for you to find your default first users. All right, now that's going to lead us to step number 2 of going from idea to app. Once you have enough validation to feel confident in building your app, you need to decide whether you are going to outsource the development or self-build the app. If you're going to be outsourcing the development of your app, then you need to consider 3 factors, and those are time, cost, and quality. Now, the rule of thumb is that you can only have 2 of the 3. So if you want a high quality app, but you don't want it to cost a lot, then you're going to be sacrificing on time. It's probably going to take a really long time for you to get that app built. If you want a high quality app, but you want it really quickly, then it's going to cost you a lot more. So just keep that in mind whenever you are looking for or speaking with development teams. You can only have 2 of the 3. Now, you can outsource your app's development to a traditional development agency that's going to use custom code to build your app, or you can outsource to a team that uses no-code tools. The biggest differences you're going to see are with time and money. With no-code tools, it's going to cost a lot less money to build your app and take a lot less time. In terms of pricing, and just to give you a general reference, you could be looking at $20,000 to outsource to a no-code agency to build just your basic MVP, whereas with a traditional development agency that's going to custom code the app, you could be paying $75,000. And prices are going to vary for sure, but just to give you an idea, Those could be the differences you're looking at. Now, if you are using no-code tools, then for as long as your app is going to be in existence, you're going to be paying some sort of fee to use that no-code platform. And you also need to make sure that the no-code platform is going to be suitable for your app and offer you the capabilities that you need. Now, of course, if you are self-building the app, you still need to choose the no-code tool or tools that you're going to be using. And I like to look at this on a spectrum that considers the level of complexity and customization that your app needs. So on the left side here, we have low levels of complexity, low levels of customization, and on the right, we have high levels. We're going to separate this spectrum into 3 sections, and then we'll dig deeper into each of them. So on the left here, we have no-code tools, and then in the middle, we have tools that talk to each other, and on the right, we have no-code builders. On that far left side of the spectrum, the no-code tools, these are generally going to be SaaS products. So software as a service tools, where you use these out-of-the-box tools to create custom flows potentially within your own business. So let's say, for example, that you wanted to create a custom sales pipeline for your business. You could use a tool like ActiveCampaign, which is an email marketing service that also lets you create pipelines and lots of different automations and flows. And you could really just control every single step a prospective customer goes through, from when they first make contact with you through all the way to when they are an actual customer. Of course, you're going to be limited by the confines of the SaaS product, but you can still create a lot of customization. Or maybe you want to create a custom survey, for example, where when one person taking the survey chooses a certain answer to a question, they will go down one path, whereas if another person chooses another answer to a question, they will go down a different path. So you could be creating a survey with conditional logic. The thing with these no-code tools is that you are going to be creating custom internal processes. And of course, you are going to be limited by the capabilities of the tools themselves. Now, in the middle of the spectrum, we're looking at tools that talk. So if you are using no-code tools on the left end of the spectrum to create individual internal processes, well, you could connect them to each other so that they talk to each other essentially and create full systems. This would happen either using APIs to connect those tools together or by using services like Zapier or Make, which essentially allow you to create triggers and actions. So if something happens in one tool, then something happens in another tool. For example, if someone submits that custom survey that you've created, then they are sent into that custom sales pipeline that you've created. Now, looking just a little bit farther up the spectrum, we start to have website development platforms come into play. Now, when we're looking at the no-code tools and the tools that talk to each other, these are internal systems and processes, but you're not able to bring external users onto them necessarily. Now, when we come to these website development platforms, like WordPress or Webflow, for example, you have the ability to create custom front ends. So a storefront or a landing page, for example, and that front end can then connect to other no-code tools. Now, this is when we start having the ability to bring external users onto the platform and sell our own product, for example. The thing to keep in mind, however, is that none of these things are data-driven applications. So if you want to create a custom application, we have to go farther to the right end of the spectrum. But what is a data-driven application? Well, if we're looking at the right side of the spectrum, these are no-code app development platforms that let you build the things farther down on the spectrum. So maybe instead of building that survey using the no-code tool that uses custom logic, maybe you want to build an app that lets other users build their own surveys using custom logic. Or maybe you want to build an application that lets people build their custom surveys, lets people build their custom sales pipelines, and have all their data in one place. Really, the easiest way to look at this is with custom no-code development platforms that fall on the right end of the spectrum. You can work your way down, but you can't do the opposite, of course, and work your way up. Now, we personally use Bubble both for ourselves and with our clients, and I'm going to leave a link in the description below to a guide that will walk you through all the ins and outs of that platform if it's something you're considering as well. The next step from there in going from idea to app is to create a custom development roadmap for yourself. And this is going to help you separate out your app into different versions and help you strategically understand what version of your app idea to build now and how it should evolve in stages thereafter. To do this, we're going to use something called the Moscow Matrix. Now, Moscow is an acronym that stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have. And the caveat to this is that it's won't have for right now. So you're going to think of every single feature and function that your app could possibly have and then separate it into those different categories. Must-have features are features that must be in place in order for the core product to even work. Should-have features are ones that need to be in place in order for the core product to be adoptable. Could have features are ones that will improve the app in some way. Maybe they'll make it more convenient to use, easier, faster, that sort of thing. So we're going to say improve here. And then won't have features are really the ones that are going to help expand the app. So they really won't even be relevant until you have a certain volume of users on board the app, for example. To dig a little bit deeper into that, a must-have feature is one that must be included to solve the very core problem that your app is being built to solve. And without it, there's really no purpose to your app at all. With must-have features, we're really thinking about closed user testing. And with the addition of should-have features, we are expanding beyond that and allowing the app to become adoptable. And then with could have features, this is when we start to take user feedback and improve the app in certain ways. So really we're just taking the product that works and that is adoptable, that consistently solves the problem in real life applications, and now we're just making it better. And then those won't have features are the ones that really just are not going to be useful for people until you have a certain volume of users on board. Now, the example I like to use for this is a review feature. So think of a freelancing app, for example, where you have freelancer profiles and then you have potential clients who come on board and choose a freelancer to work with. Well, you could have a review feature where clients can review the freelancers they've worked with, but until you have a certain number of users on board the app, those reviews just aren't going to be helpful in any way. So that's the type of feature that you'd want to hold off until later. I actually have a template that you can make a copy of to go through your own scoping process. And the template, and there's a training in there as well, it's going to guide you step by step through scoping out your features into these different development versions. And then at the end, you'll have your completed scope within the document. Now, I'm going to link to that down below, but you'll also see the link on the screen here, so you can head there, grab that, and get started with your scoping. All right, so once you have your roadmap, step number 4 is to create the pilot version of your app. And that is the version that only includes the must-have features from your roadmap. There's of course a ton that goes into the actual development of your app, but you first want to get into the habit or mindset of following a specific development cycle. So you first want to start with your app's database. This is the foundation. From there, you want to move on to the front-end architecture, and after that, you want to create your custom workflows or the logic of your app. Because you're creating a data-driven application, the database really is the foundation of your app as a whole. You really want to get this right because the database also plays a very big role in how well your app performs, how scalable it is. Having the database in place can also help inform the creation of your front-end architecture. And this is really where the screens within your app, the different flows, and just the overall navigation starts to come together. Once you have the database and then you have the front end, you can start to create the workflows or the logic that connects the two together. Now, that's by no means all there is to it, and it would be misleading to say that's the case, but if you want to take it many levels deeper, we have a free extended training over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. And if you are going to be using Bubble to build your app, this is going to be especially helpful for you because it is going to walk you through the process of taking your idea, scoping it out. So it's going to go even deeper into that, and then actually starting to use Bubble to create the foundation of your app. And so if that sounds like it would be helpful, then head there after this video. Step 5 of going from idea to app is to start your early user outreach, and this should happen alongside the development of those must-have features within your app's first version. To find those early users, you first need to identify your total addressable market, or your TAM. Your total addressable market is anyone who could possibly be a user for your app. And that's whether we're talking about the pilot version that you are about to build or the future version that has gone through many evolutions. Once you have that total addressable market in mind, you need to slim that down to identify only your early adopters. And this is different from your total addressable market. Your early adopters are those users who are going to be happy and even excited to come onto the very early first version of your app and provide their feedback to help it evolve. And not everyone is going to want to do that. Once you've identified some potential early adopters, you really just need to create a process for your user outreach. Now, when I say process, we really want to keep this as simple as possible. I want you to come up with a frequency at which you're going to work on your user outreach. So how often you're going to be in there doing that, how many touch points you're going to be making each time, and then for how long of a time period you will do that for consistently. Now, beyond that initial process, in terms of how to actually do the user outreach, we actually have a video that goes into this in depth. And I'm going to link to that down below so that you can head there as well. All right, let's talk about step number 6 of going from idea to app. This is when you're going to want to start your internal testing. Keep in mind the development of those must-have features and your early user outreach happen at the same time. So at this point, you should have already completed the development of that first version of your app, and you should have some early test users lined up and waiting. Now, just like development, there is of course a lot that goes into testing, but for a high level view, you want to take each of your must-have features and essentially test to make sure the flows are functional. So for example, let's say you have a feature within your app, a must-have feature where users are able to create job posts. So maybe it's a job board app. And then you have another must-have feature where users are able to search for job posts. And then another where users can apply to job posts. So you want to have each of those must-have features defined, which you should have already done. And then you want to go through the flow for each of them as a user from start to finish and make sure you can do that uninterrupted. Ideally, create documentation like a screen share recording showing this navigation happening so that you can refer back to it later as well. Now, you may have heard of the term user stories before, and that's essentially what we're looking at. When a user takes a certain action within the app, what should the outcome be? And during testing, does that happen? Now, this certainly isn't rocket science, but I can tell you that testing always takes longer than you think it's going to. So leading up to your launch, make sure you give yourself more time than you think you're going to need. I would advise at least doubling what you're currently thinking you'll need for testing. Now that's for internal testing, but step 7 of going from idea to app is to go through an external alpha testing process. This is when you want your app's functionality to be tested by someone other than yourself before you actually release it to your early users. To give you some more context on this, we have first the internal testing, which we already talked about. Now this is when you as the developer are testing for the app's functionality and fixing all the issues and errors that you come up against. And there will be lots of issues and errors. So this is when you're kind of putting those finishing touches on the app. Now, external alpha testing is what we're talking about in this step. This is when someone other than yourself is still performing that similar testing, but when this group of people goes through, they should not run into any issues and bugs, maybe some that you haven't caught. But the benefit to having alpha testers go through the app before actually launching to your early users is that someone who has not built the app is always going to use it a little bit differently than the way you are going to use it. And so having that perspective before you go into your bigger launch is really advantageous. Keep in mind, this type of test user is only testing for functionality. Does the app work? They are not testing or validating for the overall usefulness of the app or validation of the product as a whole. They're just making sure there are no issues and errors before releasing it to those actual early users. That leads us to step number 8, which is to test for that usefulness and actually validate the first version of your product. That brings us back to this external pilot testing. And this is when you want to take those early test users that you did the outreach for and bring them on board your app to get that product validation. To help you better understand this process, keep in mind that up to this point, your app idea has only been a theory, a hypothesis that has not yet been proven. So you have come up with a set of features that you think is going to solve a problem, and no matter how much idea validation you had, you still need external users to come on board and confirm that yes, in fact, your hypothesis was true and this will solve their problem. If you get that validation, then your pilot testing process is probably going to be very short. And from there, you'll add on those should have features, the features that should be in place in order for a user to consistently use the app to solve a problem in real life applications. And then you'll expand into a wider beta testing. And this is when you're testing for adoption. All right, so let's rework this just a little bit to clarify. We have our pilot testing, which is when we're looking for product validation. We have our beta testing, which is when we're looking for adoption. And then from there, the product really just kind of continues to roll out. You'll get feedback within beta testing on those could have features, or that will rather inform the could have features and allow you to make the app better and better as you roll it out to your wider market. And with that in mind, step number 10 is going to be your favorite, and that is when you start to charge your users. Here's the thing to understand though. A user should not be charged until they're receiving value from the app. So if the app is giving the user value, then the user should pay for use of the app. The reason why I say this is because there tends to be a lot of confusion about when to charge your users. And part of the reason why that confusion is there is because everybody's testing process is going to look differently. Everybody is going to get different feedback at different points throughout this process. And so your feedback may indicate that your users are receiving true value right here. And if that's the case, that's when you should charge them. But maybe your users are getting true value right here. And if that's the case, that's when you should charge them. But ultimately, It depends on your specific testing process, the validation you're getting, and when the user is truly getting value from the app. All right, so those are the 10 steps for going from idea to app as a first-time founder, even if you don't know how to code. But let's do a complete overview of all of these. Step number 1 is to validate your app idea. After that, you need to decide whether you are going to outsource or whether you are going to self-build the app. Now, assuming that you are using no-code tools, you need to, of course, choose which platform is ultimately going to be best for you. From there, you need to create your own custom development roadmap that's going to help guide you through the different development and testing versions. And from there, you need to create your pilot app. And these are just those must-have features that are going to solve the very core problem. You also need to be doing your user outreach. And remember, you want to keep this as simple as possible and start it early. After that, you're going to do your internal testing. Then you're going to do your alpha testing, which is the external testing that only tests for functionality. Then you're going to do your pilot testing, which is when those early test users come on board and validate your product. And from there, you're going to start charging your users as soon as they're receiving value and consistently using the app to solve a problem in real life situations. All right, I hope this was helpful in getting you from idea to app. And remember, there are links and different resources in the description below. And on top of that, check out the content you're about to see on the screen next.